Brandon Thurston from Wrestlenomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line. I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
Everybody, and welcome to a special Thursday edition of Pollock and Thurston. John Pollock from Post Wrestling and Wrestlenomics. Brandon Thurston here.
Hello.
Is I feel like so out of sorts here doing this show on a Thursday. I just had this down pat of doing this on Wednesday, but here we are a day later. TKO and their forces of will pushing us a day later so we could talk about the first quarter earnings that they put out on Wednesday. And after that, we are also going to be joined by special guest Lucas Charpiot, who I have confirmed the pronunciation.
Have you? You confirmed the pronunciation. I'm glad.
Yes. I went right to the source. Said that I am on. I did nail the pronunciation. So Lucas was kind of at the center of the storm at this Backlash France press conference this past Saturday, when right near the end of the press conference, he asked about the departure of Drew Gulak from the company, and this led to Paul Levesque responding somewhat defensively and taking a shot at two media outlets in PW Insider and Fightful, and this created quite the storm coming out of it, and a whole debate about everything involved in these press conferences. So I thought it'd be great to have Lucas on the show just to share his experience, and also just seeing the whole fallout here when he kind of became the subject here following this past Saturday.
Yes, looking forward to talking to him. But first, SEC filings.
Oh, you love documents, Brandon, and you got a plethora of them. We got an 8K, we got a 10Q, we got everything.
We got a press release. We got an update of the trending schedules. I'm calling them the trending schedules. These tables that TKO publishes that breaks out the UFC and the WWE numbers in a more digestible way.
So, I mean, the key stuff to go through, we'll get into some of the numbers, but I would say just from a headline perspective, the big announcement was the fact that Raw has found a home for the final quarter of 2024. It will stay on the USA Network with a short-term agreement before they bolt over to Netflix at the beginning of 2025, and they have been able to secure $25 million from NBC Universal to extend Raw's run on the USA Network for 3 additional months, and comes at quite a great savings for NBC Universal, given what the value of Raw for a quarter is on this current deal.
Right. It's a great deal. I did the math, it's $265 million average annual value for Raw. And we're here at the very end of the deal. And each year, this deal gets a little bit better and a little bit better for WWE. So it's on an average throughout the 5 years, it was 265. So figure in this, say the last 12 months of this deal, it's probably close to 300 million or something like that. Anyway, if you just take the 265 and divide that by 4, that's like 66 million. This is 25 million. So that's a great deal for USA Network. I imagine, you guys kind of discussed it the other night. There's probably not too much leverage on WWE's side. You don't want to say, go watch us on FS1 or go watch us on the FX
Rumble
Network. Or ESPN2 or Rumble. Rumble is always an option. And then have to say, follow us on Netflix right after that. So probably not a lot of leverage. And it's nice to be nice to your partner, because your partner is still going to be your SmackDown partner, even though they're letting go of Raw. So, probably not that much leverage on the WWE side, and a lot to gain in terms of WWE being able to keep it where it is for those extra 3 months. So, again, it's just a great deal, a great savings for USA and for NBC Universal.
Yeah, and for people that have been following this for a long period of time, I mean, from a lot of people, like the USA Network, I mean, this has been the home of Raw going back to 2005 when they jumped back from TNN/Spike TV. And that departure from Spike TV, a very contentious one, if you recall, because Spike TV in around April or so of that year, they just publicly stated, we are withdrawing from negotiations with WWE, and kind of left WWE out to scramble. And then on that final episode, I mean, they were trying to dance around their limitations of where they could promote Raw would be the next week. And as I recall, it's like right at the end, they just jam in the promotion of where they are going to be. I would imagine this is going to be a more
I remember them being censored. I remember like them promoting the network name and USA, like, or maybe it was the other way around, but I'm pretty sure it was that one, because
leaving Spike, going to USA. Yeah, like there was this whole thing that they could not promote USA Network and where they were going, and so it was a very non-amicable split by the end of things. I would imagine for this one, NBC Universal is not going to be so stringent in WWE having the ability to have a meaningful promotional campaign, especially in the month of December leading up to this Netflix launch.
Yeah, and I'd be really curious to know, they'll never tell us, but I'd be very curious to know if there was any kind of, explicit agreement as part of this agreement to say, yes, we have the ability to promote Netflix within this date and time frame that you're going to be able to watch Raw on Netflix. Because that is a real marketing value, right? That's a huge marketing value for WWE. Imagine if they, were able to buy similar ad time. Like, that's a huge marketing value for them to be able to promote to their viewers and their fans that this is where you're going to be able to watch Raw from now on. So, I mean, that's millions of dollars in value right there, which better helps explain, I suppose, why this fee is so low.
And they had gone so far in last year to even state the fact that they were earmarking nothing for this quarter. Yeah. So this is kind of found money for them in the form of $25 million. Even if you're looking at this as undervaluing of what Raw's rights are, it's not like anything was baked into that particular quarter. So it's just, when $25 million drops from the sky, TKO is there to pick it all up.
Yeah, I guess in like a worst case scenario, they could have aired it on YouTube, which is like the last resort that I can think of. You would at least be able to put it on YouTube and think about, generating, I can't imagine that'd be a really interesting experiment to see if you just aired it exclusively in the US on YouTube, how many views it would get and how much watch time it would get and how much ad revenue it would generate. Probably not 25 million for 3 months, but it would be curious to know. And just to say that, like, that's, I can't imagine they couldn't expect some kind of revenue for this. They would have monetized it some way, but yeah.
So they did report net revenues for the quarter. This is for TKO as a whole of $629.7 million, but posting a net loss of $249.6 million. Why such a significant loss for the quarter, Brandon? Why is this looking so bleak here when revenues are through the roof?
Is WWE dying? I thought that was it. No, it's this is the cost of having such dominance over the MMA industry when you're UFC, and all of the complaints that the Kung Lee participants had, and they are paying a $335 million settlement to those plaintiffs, both of those lawsuits, right? That's combined.
Yes.
And most of it is being recognized in this quarter, so we have a net loss of $250 million. But we don't just focus on GAAP measures, generally accepted accounting principles. Oh no, we focus as well on generally unaccepted accounting principles, such as adjusted EBITDA. And when we look at adjusted EBITDA and we exclude things like lawsuit settlements and taxes and the Rock stock compensation, this was a very positive adjusted EBITDA quarter for TKO, where they, as you can see on the screen here, $282 million in adjusted EBITDA.
Yeah, you eliminate the cost of doing business, and that's how you get to adjusted EBITDA for the company. So painting a very nice picture there. The settlement with the two antitrust suits, it's going to be, as Brandon mentioned, it's a total of $335 million, but they are splitting it up into 3 payment installments, with $100 million this quarter, $100 million in the fourth quarter, and $135 million in the second quarter of 2025. But also mentioned several times on the call is the fact that they have reached a settlement without introducing any further changes to our business operations. Read that to be no structural changes, nothing affecting fighter contracts. This is just simply paying our way out of these suits, and it's a big win for Endeavor, because this was something that was looming over UFC and by extension TKO because of the unknown about when you're hearing treble damages, and there's always that potential of this figure, how high could it go? And this is a major albatross that they have eliminated.
And there's no, as you said, this is basically just a pure cash settlement then. This is all fighters who will split this $335 million, right?
Yes.
And there's no, they haven't gotten a fighters association as a result of this. There's not like there's going to be any kind of collective bargaining for UFC fighters, but there is a fee, and then it's not just a parking ticket. This is not just a speeding ticket, right? $335 million on the scale of UFC is probably more than a quarter of revenue. I don't think they reported that much revenue for UFC in this quarter. So that's a real penalty. Does that change any of their practices though, you think? Does that deter them from anything?
I mean, when you look at the idea of, lessening the restrictions on the contracts, if anything, like we did see when these suits were filed, you did see the introduction of these sunset clauses where there could be an end date to these contracts. That's how Francis Ngannou was able to leave the UFC as heavyweight champion instead of these indefinite rollovers. But as John Nash has explained and others, like a lot of these newer contracts, I mean, they've somewhat reintroduced some of these more restrictive measures in the contracts to hold on to your fighters as well. If in future you have these issues, and this bleeds over to what we're talking about with WWE, it's arbitration is the venue that these are going to be tried in rather than in court. So they protected themselves to a grand degree. It would seem that the only way they could be hit with another antitrust suit would be if the PFL and any other competing organizations believed that these are antitrust practices that are harming these companies. But the fighters are, I mean, this kind of was their swing towards any meaningful change for a generation of fighters and for future fighters to come. And I would state, like, when you're seeing these big sponsorships, it's not like that's bleeding down and the fighters have any cut of any of these big sponsorships that they're signing. And we can look at how the UFC's sponsorships are exploding. Like, the fighters don't have any rights to that. They don't have obviously any rights to any of the media rights. But
what I'm getting is these fighters' claims were viable enough, and it took 10 years to get here, but were viable enough to get a multi-$100 million settlement because of specific claims they made about how they were treated and how their contracts were, right? If changes aren't made by UFC to avoid repeating the viability of those claims, why wouldn't they do something to deter a future similar set of claims against them?
So when the settlement was announced, apparently like the plaintiffs' representation had stated they had like a 60-day period before they could comment on this. And I think that's going to be one of the key questions is what, after a 10-year fight for this, what was the decision-making process to go this route that did not come with any hidden structural changes, or like you can claim a certain degree of something here that you are delivering money, like real money to fighters. It's not life-changing money, but it is a monetary amount that you mentioned. It's not just like some frivolous amount. But I don't know what the thought process was to go this far, and you're weeks away from a court date that was supposed to start in mid-April, and perhaps it was just the risk of walking away with nothing versus, if you had gone in and maybe you have a sympathetic jury, maybe you don't. I don't know what goes into the thought process there, but this was an opportunity to make massive change, and I just think the optimism level is very, very low now in terms of this makeup changing at any time in the future. I don't think you will see this kind of suit brought forward, at least on behalf of the fighters.
And this was a 10-year length litigation. Was the class period also about 10 years?
The class period, so it was the first suit covered a class period from December of 2010 until June of 2017. So we're talking a 7-year period. And then the second suit, which was led by Cajun Johnson and others, starts the day after, July 1st, 2017, up until the present when the suit was filed. So that was your two classes of fighters going back to December of 2010.
So about a 7-year period then?
Yes, for the first class.
So if you divide $335 million over 7 years, that's like $48 million a year, which is not too bad of an expense, I would say, on UFC scale, where they're making in this quarter $313 million. They're making it at this point. Now, they weren't always each year, but in this year they are making. Last year they reported about $1.3 billion in revenue. So I mean, that's kind of a cost of doing business, I guess, if you think about it that way. But not the hugest penalty for them, but substantial. It is, that's probably many UFC events worth of production expenses or something like that.
We also got the breakdown of both UFC and WWE's revenue. I mean, relatively close in terms of like what they're generating for media rights. Of course, it's a bit of an imbalance when you look at the number of hours being produced by WWE versus UFC. Live events, it's WWE at 50.2 million compared to 35.3 million for UFC. Again, a discrepancy in the amount. Sponsorship, big advantage for UFC that reported revenues of $48.6 million compared to 13.8 for WWE, which again, they constantly hit you over the head with the fact that WWE is open territory, that they see a lot of potential growth here, and where this number is going to escalate. I don't know if they will ever be able to be at the level of UFC and how embedded they are with so many of these companies, but they obviously see that potential.
Yeah, I mean, this number in Q1, 13.8, is not all that different from these quarters going backwards, right? Like that's right in the neighborhood of these two prior years that we have trailing behind it. I wonder.
I guess the second quarter will reflect WrestleMania, and see if like that is, because the Prime sponsorship only started with WrestleMania, correct? So that would be reflected there in Q2. I guess we'll look at that and see if there's a major upswing. As one of the callers or the question askers mentioned, the fact it seemed sponsorship at WrestleMania was very high volume, which was a nice way of saying you were inundated with sponsorships on this WrestleMania broadcast.
Yeah, but I mean, this Q1, let's call it 14, the Q1 of the prior year, 16, the year before that, 16. So this was lower. I wonder if the Vince news had anything to do with lower than prior years Q1's sponsorship revenue numbers. But the Q2 will be more interesting because, as you said, that'll include all of the dude wipes and all the liquor sponsorships and things of that nature. So
healthcare products, as I think they classified it in the different buckets as they listed it. Yes, dude wipes, well represented, as well as a hostage tape. Are you familiar with hostage tape?
No. What is hostage tape?
It's some kind of tape manufacturer that you put over your mouth to sleep or something like that.
That's a UFC sponsor, right?
That's a UFC sponsor.
Yes. Let's not get those confused, of course.
That's right. Because Dude Wipes is a dual sponsor, I believe. So
yes.
Also, I would say was brought up pretty consistently was Saudi Arabia. Let's hear from Mark Shapiro on the current relationship between the company and Saudi Arabia.
What I would say there is, let's remember we have a strong and healthy relationship with the kingdom through WWE and doing 2 annual events a year. And I'll just, remind folks for the avoidance of doubt, those deals were primarily and highly tied to Vince McMahon. And there was a lot of speculation with Vince being gone. Would that impact the relationship in a negative way? Would they be looking to get out of it? And I would say proudly that, Nick Khan in particular has developed and sustained, cultivated, nurtured a very, very strong relationship in a handoff from Vince. And they have a lot of trust in each other. They have a lot of faith. We've been delivering on those events, and potentially we could look to do more events. But nothing is planned beyond those 2 events at this time. And we will continue to look at eventizing or festivalizing those WWE events more than we already do.
Festivalizing. Okay.
Yes.
That's one.
And eventizing.
Eventizing. Okay. Those are ones to add to the bingo card. So Saudi Arabia has come up a lot over the past couple of days because there was an announcement by Turki Al-Sheikh of the General Entertainment Authority that they were extending their partnership with the UFC, which would include, so they're going to go there June 22nd. I believe they've disclosed that has a $20 million site fee attached to it. Then they've added another card for either late this year or early next year. They're also going to sponsor the UFC's event at the Sphere on September 14th in Las Vegas. And most of all, Power Slap is going to Riyadh
Yes.
at some point as well as part of this deal. And Turki Al-Sheikh spoke to Mike Coppinger of ESPN, stating that there would be an enhancement to the deal with WWE that will be signed in June, with him mentioning the fact that they would like to go after WrestleMania or the Royal Rumble to be in Saudi Arabia. So Mark Shapiro did not indicate that they are escalating the number of shows WWE is going to do. I don't know what will be contained in this quote unquote enhancement to the deal. But typically that would mean more money for more product.
Yes. And I think I imagine maybe it would be Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. That would be the two big ones that could possibly go to Saudi Arabia. Would they not do SummerSlam there just because it would be so hot in July or August in Saudi Arabia? And I know there were issues in the past with how hot it was at a recent Saudi event. But how much money? So $50 million, we know, each time they go to Saudi Arabia for one of these events. How much, if you're WWE, if you're Nick Khan, and you're talking to the chairman, Turki Al-Sheikh, how much money would you settle for to bring Saudi Arabia to bring WrestleMania to Riyadh?
Well, I think you have to decipher if it's a WrestleMania or a Royal Rumble, because if it's a WrestleMania, you're getting a lot more than one show potentially. And I think with a WrestleMania, I think you would be driving it as high as possible, because I could only see the calculus of, we are not just going to be bringing WrestleMania and the shoulder events. We're going to be bringing tourism to the country. And I think that's the big play here, is to make this a destination for tourism, and WrestleMania being a vehicle for that. And
all the indie events that come with WrestleMania.
Yes. I mean, you could only imagine. I'm sure Game Changer Wrestling is already getting on top of things for potential.
They're going to Hawaii. Why not Riyadh?
I mean, it's next on the stop. You could only imagine. I would say certainly for if it's a Royal Rumble, like I think you're aiming high. Like you're going north of $50 million, especially if we also see what we're going to in a few weeks with the King and Queen of the Ring tournament. They're bringing SmackDown there. Like, did SmackDown come with any additional fee attached to it? Because previously it's always just SmackDown's been a taped episode from the week prior.
Right. Yeah. I think as we have these two companies combined now, there's a lot less transparency into what WWE specifically does, or UFC, I guess, for that matter. But it's not like UFC was a standalone company that was publicly traded before this. So because we have two companies combined, I think the bar to report something or to expect the executives to answer a question and give investors insight into something, it becomes even higher, right? So a question like, did you get any extra money for the SmackDown to go along with the PLE in Saudi Arabia? I think that becomes even harder to expect any kind of granularity or insight on, because we've got a combined company that's whose scale is so much greater, and the level of materiality for disclosing something becomes higher, because this is now not just a whatever WWE was on its own $5 billion market capital company, but now it's like a $12 million market capital company with the two companies combined. So we don't know. There are other questions that I was interested to know, and again, because you've got both of these companies' issues at hand here, not just one of them anymore. But the releases, I want to be careful here. Maybe their contracts just expired, excuse me. But, the people who have parted ways with WWE recently, many of whom were of Chinese descent or Indian descent, and it raises questions about whether WWE looks at what they have to do with certain media partners differently. Do you have to have so many Indian wrestlers under contract? Do they feel like they don't have to have so many Chinese wrestlers under contract? And I don't think they've had a TV deal in China. They used to have this PPTV TV deal in China. I don't know if they have any real media deal in China at the moment. Do they look at it differently with all of these international rights? I think virtually all of them, maybe the exception of the NBC Saudi deal, eventually going to Netflix. So you've got one partner for 10 years, maybe 20 years, holding all of these rights. Is it that important to keep certain talent who appeal to certain media partners in certain regions? Is it that important to have them anymore? That's what was brought to mind when I saw, all the departures that happened recently.
And we had Jinder Mahal, both members of Indus Sher, Xia Li, Boa, I think those were the key ones when you're talking about international stars that they had plans for. And I think that's probably a good indication of what they're looking at in terms of especially Aboa, who had been in their system since 2016, had not really progressed to a certain level, wasn't a regular on television. And I think combined with just where they are on an international scale, I mean, this NXT Europe thing just seems to be like it'll be where is the incentive for them to launch something on the ground in the UK and be running and just putting dollars into a region versus, the idea of just going here several times a year, doing it for big site fees and selling your product rather than kind of ingraining yourself with a performance center or at some small touring company.
And this seems like a more cost-conscious company under Mark Shapiro's supervision. I want to talk about that too, about how little Ari Emanuel participated in this. But
yeah, he came in for the opening remarks, and dude, he was out of there. He didn't have.
I don't think he was there in the first place. I think he recorded those opening remarks, a day ago or something, and then he was not even in the room. But we've heard Mark Shapiro early in this merger talk about the house shows in the C and the D markets and how those might go away. And there was discussion here about. There was one analyst who was asking, you've got so much demand and appeal for the UFC events. You're still doing quite a few of your UFC events, the UFC Apex. Are you thinking about doing more events on the road? And the answer was basically in very high business speak. Andrew Schleimer, the CFO, said, events at the UFC Apex are so cheap to run and they're so profitable that we run them there, that it's going to take a lot for us to go back on the road. And Mark Shapiro did sort of moderate that and say, if there's any doubt, we lean towards going on the road. But I can imagine how if you're doing this in this facility that you own, that there's no expensive load in and load out cost like there is on the road. It could be very profitable when most of your revenue for these events is coming from media, not from ticket sales.
And in terms of the NXT Battleground show that'll be there at the Apex on June 9th, they indicated this, it sounds like this is just going to be like a premium fan event through On Location, that you're going to have a small number of fans that are going to pay for not just a ticket, but probably some big experience that you get in such a small venue. And that seems to be the impetus here behind. I mean, I don't know how much you can replicate versus running. They were going to do Savannah, Georgia that night, and you were guaranteed going to move 3,000 to 4,000 tickets in a market like Savannah, Georgia for an NXT event. Can you replicate that with the economics of running the Apex, that off the top of my head, you're going to fit like 150 people into this building?
Yeah. And it was going to be the night before a Raw, so they were going to be minimized expenses because of that in that case. But nonetheless, they decided to move it. I'm sure there'll be, research and development benefits here in terms of learning what it's like to run a WWE event here, and if that's viable to do more of these with WWE in the future.
We'll hear one more clip here from Mark Shapiro talking about the UFC and its domestic television rights that will be coming up at the end of 2025 and where he sees UFC positioned in the marketplace.
We look at UFC as a premium sports product with great growth ahead of it. We feel good about the potential package that we'll end up with. And we see that demand for live sports is outstripping the supply of premium sports content. And the great thing about UFC, let's not forget, it's not just a volume product. In fact, it's not really a volume product. It's a premium volume product, sort of like the NFL used to be before Thursday Night Football. It was, frankly, Sunday and Monday nights. It was driven by scarcity. And I think UFC benefits the same way. We're also both at once a subscriber acquisition tool and a churn antidote. We're attractive to digital and linear, and we're year-round. So going back to the initial point, I mean, we feel good about where we are. We're live, we're urgent, we're a shared experience, and we're optimistic at the potential package we will end up with.
You got your pen and paper, Brandon? Premium volume product.
A churn antidote.
Churn antidote. Yes. It's like it comes in a vial and you just put it into your vein. They are very high. And man, Mark Shapiro definitely got his victory lap, and somewhat justifiable here. I mean, Mark Shapiro is the ultimate advocate of the sports rights bubble. It will only grow and grow and grow. And he got to kind of bask in the reports about the NBA that might get almost 3 times what their value is at the current set of contracts between Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery. So he very much feels the UFC is going to be in great position, and that their 3-month negotiating window with Disney will open in mid-January, and they have a 3-month window before they can go to free agency. And they've already indicated in the past, they've already had inquiries about when they can talk. So they're at least projecting that there is a lot of interest in the UFC rights. But I mean, that is a year away before they can talk to outside parties, and who knows what the services and options will be come a year from now.
Yeah. So Mark Shapiro used to, I forget what his executive position was when he worked for ESPN. But he did, as you said, take a victory lap on, as he has before on these calls, the notion that, oh my God, is the sports rights bubble finally bursting? And here he is saying, you know, as somebody who's overseeing UFC and WWE have valuable live TV rights fees, he's saying, look at every deal that's come down in the news in the last several years, and this deal has been good, that deal has been good. It looks like the NBA deal is going to be a big raise. It's the subtlety of what I would suggest is being talked about, though, is that the expectations, certainly a year ago, for what WWE was going to be able to get were higher than what they actually got. Now they got an increase. They got about a 30%, 40% increase. We're still trying to figure it out. But that's not what the market was expecting some time ago. They were expecting at some point maybe an 80% increase for WWE. And the degree to which people are getting raises, valuable sports properties are getting raises, is just more moderate, more mild than the crazy days of media spending that were happening. I would suggest right up until the point where Netflix reported its first, even quarter-to-quarter subscriber number, which was, I want to say, a couple of years ago now. And that's when the moderation in the media spending began, because we got an idea of, okay, this is how far streaming goes. And it's not going to be this endless, unforeseen growth that just happens forever. There is a ceiling to this.
So we may circle back to this a little later on in the program, but to kind of just put a bow on this, Mark Shapiro, how would you categorize the first quarter for TKO?
All things are cooking here.
They're cooking.
We are going to be joined by our guest, but before we do that, let us go back to this past Saturday, right after Backlash. It was the press conference, and here is the clip that everyone was talking about.
Lucas Charpiot for 10 Count Media. I just wanted to ask you, Fightful and PW Insider reported that Drew Gulak was released by WWE. I just wanted you to clarify on the situation, if that was true. And is there anything to do with Ronda Rousey's accusation about sexual...
Well, first of all, if you're going to cite news sources, pick good ones. That's where I would start. Credible, really, maybe. Yeah. We release talent all the time. We have NFL releases 400 or 500 people a year, players a year. We release talent all the time. It's a part of what we do. You cannot just hire people, bring them in, keep hiring more people, and just keep bringing them in. So an unfortunate part of the job is talent get released. Can I say that he was released? He was not released. His contract was just not renewed.
That was Paul Levesque at the Backlash press conference, and the question brought up by our guest at this time, Lucas Charpiot, who we are very happy to have here on Pollock and Thurston. Lucas, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure this has been a just crazy couple of days for you in the spotlight.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, John. Hi, Brandon. First and foremost, I just wanted to thank you for giving me this platform today. Yeah, it's been a weird couple of days, definitely. And I'm looking forward to this chat and to talk about, what happened at the press conference and everything that fell out.
Well, let's go back just to Saturday, and you brought this up near the end of the press conference, and tell us just a bit about the vibe in the room, the sense you got after asking the question? Was there anything discernible about reaction from other media members? And did you sense that this was going to be something that was focused upon online afterward?
So you can see it in the extract that I'm a bit not nervous, but I heard almost immediately after I said the name Drew Gulak that there was a sense in the room of, why is he asking that question? What's his problem? You can hear in the audio, I believe, right after the question, some groans, may not be the right term in English, but people were like, gosh, as if I was attacking
gasps
their leader or whatever. Yeah, gasp, definitely. And I just want to clarify, like, publicly, because obviously some people online took shots at me and were telling that I wanted my moment. I wanted to take a shot at Triple H. This was absolutely not my intentions. I just, I was paid to be in this room, to be a journalist. I was not paid to be a fan in that room. And I asked the question that as a reader, if someone else in another press conference would have asked that question, I would have read the article. I would have watched Triple H's reaction to that question. So for me, it was an important topic to touch on. And because English is not my native language, it was also the question that was the most well articulated in my mind, because those questions, I didn't write anything. It was on the fly. And I wanted to make sure that I had the question worded in my mind before telling it. And the only thing I have regret is I hesitate a bit asking the question. Maybe I could have worded it better, but I still believe it was the right question to ask.
And I guess just to get us up to speed here on what has happened following this, where Paul Levesque did basically criticize and question the credibility of Fightful and PW Insider, as you referenced them as being the sources of Drew Gulak's exit from WWE. But Sean Ross Sapp has, and I believe he said that Mike Johnson from PW Insider has also received a cheese board from WWE and a handwritten note. So that's where we are there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Lucas,
sorry, John. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Tell us a little bit about sort of when the reaction started to trickle in for you. I mean, was it instantaneous through Twitter? Was it later when you're checking your phone? Because I mean, I can somewhat relate, having gone through a very similar situation to you earlier this year at a UFC press conference, is that, I mean, I left not thinking a thing, and the next morning realizing, oh boy, this struck a nerve with people.
I knew, considering the other questions, that my question was going to stick out and being talked about more, but I really wasn't expecting that. It was my first press conference for WWE, and I'm 21 years old. I wasn't prepared to be the center of attention. Sorry, maybe it's foolish to me to think about that, but yeah, I wasn't ready for that. And luck was on my side because my phone had only 1% of battery left. So I checked all the messages the next morning. So for the night, I knew, because one of the PR, as soon as I sent my question to Triple H, said to me, "What a dumb thing to do." And so I knew there was going to be backlash online, but I wasn't.
Somebody from WPR said that was. Sorry, Lucas. Somebody from WPR said that was a dumb thing to do, to ask your question.
Yeah, right after I asked it, he looked at me and said, "What a dumb thing to do."
Wow. That's very discouraging. That's very disappointing to hear that would be the reaction. I don't think you need this reassurance, Lucas, but you were completely, this was a completely fair question to ask. And I was, very impressed of the fact that English is not your first language. I thought you conveyed it very clearly, and I thought that the way it was asked was very easy to understand. And I think for Paul Levesque, I think he just got very defensive in the moment, and it's not the first time we have seen him kind of react like this to. I hazard to even call this a confrontational question, because this happened 24 hours ago, totally relevant question to be asking, and I think that he just then seized on the Ronda Rousey portion and attributed it incorrectly to PW Insider and Fightful, who had not reported that, nor were you linking that to them. That was a clear follow-up from you about whether it was a result of the Ronda Rousey accusation, which anyone would kind of put those two together as well. I was disappointed with Paul Levesque's reaction, and I'm even more disappointed to hear that this PR person would have had that reaction to you. And just, I mean, this is one PR person, but nonetheless, I think that's a horrible message to send to your press corps of what are or are not questions that they want to be asked at a press conference.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to clarify, and once again, I'm thankful that you gave me this platform. By no means I implied that PW Insider and Fightful reported that Drew Gulak was released because of the Ronda Rousey's allegation. I saw that on Twitter, and even if you think my sentence was poorly worded, which to an extent I also think it is, I could have done better, but that is something I never said. Like I said, I'm 21 years old. I'm new to the space. I've been, covering wrestling for like 3 years, but I have a lot to learn. I can take valid criticism, but I can take valid criticism on something I didn't do. And that I never said.
Yeah, I think we're all preaching to the same choir here, but I don't think, despite English not being your first language, there was nothing confusing about your question, in my view. There was nothing, and I don't think Paul Levesque's response to your question even gave the impression that he didn't that he didn't understand your question in a way other than what it was meant to be understood as. I don't think he responded to it in a way that suggested that he thought that you were saying that Gulak was separated from WWE because of what Ronda Rousey said. I don't think he was even saying that. I think what he was saying, clearly what he was saying was that he was trying to emphasize a difference between being released in the middle of your contract and having your contract decided to not be renewed, and your contract means just being allowed to be expired, which was, according to him, that's what was happening with Drew Gulak. He was not cut in the middle of his deal, but they were just letting his deal expire with no renewal. And he didn't answer the real heart of your question, which was, did his exit from WWE have anything to do with what Ronda Rousey said when she was on News Nation in April?
Yeah, and of course, because the question had to be short because it was the last one, I couldn't say out loud my implicature. But what I implied by saying that question is WWE is currently involved in a sex trafficking lawsuit. And it's not just Vince McMahon's lawsuit. It's the entire culture of the company that is being talked about. Ronda Rousey, in her interview, the Drew Gulak extract is like for 30 up to 45 seconds. But she is describing an environment that is toxic to women. And what I wanted to imply by my question is, are you doing things to make sure that your locker room and your company is safer for women? But of course, I couldn't say out loud that implicature. But that's what I wanted to know from Triple H at that moment.
What was your kind of impression of these press conferences going in, from ones that maybe you viewed from afar, and now having the experience going through it, even separating your own question and answer with Paul Levesque to just the overall vibe of the media, and if any kind of thought you have just having gone through the experience of a WWE press conference now that you've attended one?
I'm other people's work, they do them, I do me, but I always find funny is not the right term, but that WWE is so scared about those more serious questions, where at the same time they want their product, they want their company to feel more legitimate to the mainstream audience. And if you want your product to feel legitimate, you should be ready to be asked about more serious topics and not just kayfabe questions. And this answer from Triple H, for me, it's not surprising at all. Triple H's A-trade for wrestling media is not new. What he seemed to forget is that wrestling media are often useful to him, because we can see, for example, with them doing the release now instead of them on WWE.com. I think it's the case since 2021. I don't believe they put an article for the release, but wrestling media are useful to them, to the company. So I wasn't surprised by Triple H's answer. And I would have thought that he would have been given advices since the Rumble presser, when after the Vince McMahon affair, when he was asked about it, he said, I focus on the positive, what an amazing week. I thought he would have been given advice since then, but obviously that's not the case. So yeah, I was aware that there were mostly kayfabe questions in those press conferences. But like I said, I think if you want your company to feel more legitimate, you should also be asked about non-kayfabe questions.
Yeah, I guess I think there's a big division in the kinds of responses that I've gotten. I think you've gotten, Lucas, in terms of you'll have some people who will be really positive that you asked, a real, quote unquote, real question among a lot of other questions that are sort of kayfabe questions or whatever. But then you have some other people who are like, who will criticize you for daring to, I don't know, change the tone of the party for a moment. But I guess, I don't know what that's about in terms of like where there are two very different philosophies, I think, that people come to those situations with, in terms of there are people who just want to, I don't know, have an experience of like being a sort of a glorified fan there and asking a question that just sort of plays into the positive nature of what's often going on. And then there's, somebody who wants to be like a real reporter and ask a real question that serves the purpose of pressing for transparency and addressing problems and asking an executive, certainly in Paul Levesque's case, to address a question related to a real problem in the company. And I don't know why there's such a division among those two ways of people responding to those questions. But I imagine that was your experience as well, in terms of this sort of division of strong negative and strong positive responses.
Yeah, definitely. I've had my lot of messages telling me that I ruined the party of Backlash, which I don't understand, because like I said, I was not paid to be a fan in that room. In the arena, I was kind of a fan. I enjoyed the show. I had a great time, but as soon as I enter the room, I cannot be a fan. But that's my opinion. Like I said, I'm not here to judge other people's work. But yeah, there's definitely this division that as soon as you derail from the narrative that they want people to believe, that you're attacking a leader or whatever, which is not the case. Like I said, I really want to state that I did not ask this question to take a shot at Triple H, or nor to have a moment or be famous. I did it because I would have enjoyed his answer from like a reader perspective. Like if another journalist would have asked his question in another press conference, I would have read his answer. So to me, that was an important topic to touch on.
I'll throw this question out to both of you, maybe even start with Brandon, that if like the answer or the question of why does WWE do these press conferences? Is there, and do you foresee them like coming to a point where is this more hassle than it's worth, or is it the idea that it's enough of a extension of its content that they can slap a sponsorship on and you get another hour of content you produce that will get some questions along the way? And I don't believe that all the people in WWE necessarily are against kind of having a healthier debate of like real topics. But, you know, we have these situations, and does this become a point where it's more trouble than it's worth from WWE's end to even to have this as a story in the wrestling ecosystem for several days after Backlash? I'm curious both of your thoughts on that.
I think first, the reason why they do them, and I would say this all started when Paul Levesque started to do those NXT media calls in early 2014. And I would say at this point, the benefit to WWE is that they help them have good relationships with media, which I think especially in the Nick Khan era has been something that they are more consciously pursuing and figuring out ways in which they can use the media to their benefit, and the ways in which they can have good relationships. And maybe that cultivates kinder coverage to WWE. If you've got strong relationships with outlets that have the widest net to wrestling fans matter to a certain extent, but it's good to have good relationships with those outlets so that they will give you more beneficial coverage. Or if you need to, give them some information to get out there, it's easier to do that. It does create some content that you can have, for one thing. I don't know if this Backlash press conference had a sponsor, but often they do have a sponsor, and that's one more thing that you can put an ad unit on and make a little bit more money doing. And it allows you to highlight certain talent, and usually it's the winners of big matches who come out there and take questions. And I will say, as I've said before, I've never gotten any pushback from WWE media relations over questions that I've asked. But I would, if I'm being optimistic rather than cynical, I would say maybe there are some people in that company who do want some real questions from real reporters that will, in a very small way, help the company be pushed to be a little bit better. I don't expect that by asking a question about the WWE Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis lawsuit, that like it's going to cause this great change in WWE's policies or something like that. But I do think when you're asking a question, I don't necessarily expect an answer. I would like one. I don't necessarily expect a clear and honest answer, but I think even if your question is not directly answered, you are still raising an issue, and you're saying, by raising this issue, this is important enough to ask my one and only question about, and that will help drive a conversation around this subject, and that should all contribute in a small way, along with everybody else's behavior all the time, should contribute to the scrutiny and the criticism that hopefully pressures WWE to be a more just place for workers, for staff, for talent.
Definitely. And one way also I think that WWE wanted to make those press conferences is to talk about their growth and showing off a bit. Every time Triple H comes to a presser, he opens up with WWE breaking records, etc. So it's also a way to show off to the public size. And I would say this, I think also WWE wants to be bigger than the pro wrestling industry itself. Like, you see the way that they're doing those press conferences, it's kind of the same way that they're doing it after a soccer match or at UFC. So it's also a way to legitimate their product, and for it to be bigger than the pro wrestling industry. And like I said before, if you want your product to feel more legitimate to a mainstream audience, you should be prepared to be asked about more serious issues.
We'll just end off here, Lucas. Certainly it comes across here that this was, an experience for you that it doesn't sound like this is going to deter you from your coverage in future. It's always something I am concerned about, especially for like younger reporters that are just thrown into this online. It can be horrible when you get this kind of a response. And I always worry about other reporters out there that maybe they just don't want to ask that kind of question and then be scrutinized to such a degree. And I really hope you're not having any of those reactions to this whole thing. Because again, you handled yourself really well in this press conference. And I hope that the negativity that came your way is not anything that's going to stop you from attending press conferences in the future and having the same mindset that you approach this one with.
Thank you very much, John, first of all. And it's definitely an experience that made me learn a lot. And I will keep grinding. My ankle is healing. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next press conferences. I will make sure to have a better English than I had. My English accent. Thank you, Brandon. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to those next press conferences, and I will not stop.
And where can people follow some of your work? I know it is in French, but just promote any of your outlets and where people can follow you.
So I'm actually a freelance writer. So my portfolio, I don't know if that's the right term in English, but is in my pinned tweet in my Twitter account. You can shoot me a DM if you want me to write for your media. And I've worked for VL Media, which is a Parisian media for like 3 years. I mostly did interviews for them, covered motorsports as well a bit. So I'm now a freelance writer, so I don't have media to plugged on, but I'm looking forward to write for for medias in the future.
Well, there you go. Paul Levesque, you can do is make good and do a sit down here with Lucas. Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
Lucas, you've not received the cheese board yet.
No, I don't expect American cheese. As a French person, I would not accept American cheese. That's not something I'm willing to accept. And I would like to say, before we end this, I would like to acknowledge John's French pronunciation, which was perfect. John, I'm sure you took French
He's Canadian,
in high school.
I did.
Oh,
yes.
that is
yes.
nice.
Yes, we were, in Canada, we had to take, I had to take French throughout elementary school and then my first 2 years of high school. So yes, I have, I'm glad I nailed the pronunciation and I did my homework. I did have to message Lucas ahead of time, but Lucas, we will definitely have you on again sometime. It was really great to speak with you and great work this past weekend. And it was great to have a more extended chat with you here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the support, and I just want to publicly thank Brandon as well for giving me feedbacks and reassuring me after the press conference. I very much appreciate it, and thank you, John, also for your support. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Lucas.
Thank you so much, Lucas.
All right, that was Lucas Charpiot joining us, discussing the Backlash press conference from this past Saturday, which was, I thought Brandon also did a really great kind of reaction to it the next day for the free version of Wrestlenomics, if you want to go back the way things turned out this past weekend. Yes. All right, before we wrap up here, let us quickly go through a few other notes here. WrestleTix noted that Clash at the Castle at the OVO Hydro in Glasgow, Scotland, their first estimate was already over 9,800 tickets distributed, with the current configuration leaving about 1,300 or so remaining tickets, and apparently the lowest ticket price for this show, $380 US. So Mark Shapiro, all things are cooking in Scotland.
Yeah. How do you feel about this? Because some people feel that, hey, look, you're pricing people out. You're pricing maybe longtime fans out. I remember Nick and Stephanie at a press conference, at a tech conference, saying, yeah, we're pricing the best seats really high to make the most money, but we're also keeping the cheapest seats, a standard price so that everybody can get to them. This is one example where maybe that's not the case. Is that a big deal, or is that like it's just supply and demand, and there's people that are buying it. It's not like there's thousands of tickets sitting out there. So
it's sort of where I'm at, and this is a major discussion on the MMA side too, because as expensive as these tickets are, like go look at some of the prices for this UFC 303 card with Conor McGregor or Madison Square Garden last November. It's just, if there wasn't an audience buying these tickets, they would not be ramping them up so high. And I mean, if you're expecting TKO to be the company that is going to be thinking of, making sure that we don't price out the fan base, I mean, that is not this company. And
is there any real risk in that though? Are you risking like alienating a certain demographic of fans who maybe just don't have the income to afford this kind of thing? Is that any kind of long-term risk?
I guess you could certainly argue that over time this is going to become a product that is not for you. Like I look at
it on TV for virtually for free, but
from an anecdotal perspective, I mean, for years it was like getting Toronto Maple Leafs tickets were so tough to get because it was just so routine that they would sell out, and yet they had this enormous fan base, many of whom couldn't even couldn't even get the opportunity to buy tickets. I don't know if it like whittles away your fan base over time, but it's like you look at a similar one like Formula One. Like that's a very expensive sport if you want to go and attend a race. And it's not as though it's secluded from your audience in that they can still watch, they can still follow this product, but it is becoming now the idea that attending a live event, like there is a scarcity when it comes to tickets in a lot of these underserved markets, that like international ones, that they're also opting to go to these places where, I mean, we look at this and yeah, they haven't completely sold this out, but they will. And what is the ceiling? They certainly could have run a stadium in Glasgow and it probably would have performed really well. And that would be opening things up to more people to have the ability to buy tickets where your floor would not be $380.
Yeah. So we should clarify. So this is 303 British pounds at the time of this estimate from WrestleTix. The lowest price, I imagine these tickets have all been sold now. The lowest price was 105 pounds. When these tickets went on sale. But that is, what is that in US dollars? I think that's like 150 or something like that in US dollars. But the point is, yes, these are very expensive tickets, and they're going to try to, I mean, we just saw the Backlash gate. That is the highest gate for an arena event in WWE history, and they're going to try to break it again as soon as possible.
Also, this week, we had the Raw number, 1,619,000 viewers and a 0.53 in the demo, while NXT doing 659,000 viewers and a 0.19. For Raw, they were up against the Pacers and Knicks, as well as the Boston Bruins, fresh off their victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 in overtime on Saturday, taking on the Florida Panthers. And then NXT, this was actually their second highest number since January, with a 36% increase in the 18 to 49 audience from the prior week and a 17% jump in the audience. So a bit of a bump there for NXT.
Yes, it's a much better number for NXT than the prior week. I think it was a low mark in many weeks. And we'll see what happens with Dynamite tonight. But I don't think these were any huge takeaways here from these ratings. I didn't see. I think the Raw rating was pretty normal as well. And we'll see if week number 2, since the Tony Khan neck brace angle, which didn't seem to pop a rating last week at all, really. We'll see if there's any difference, as it's now 4:00 Eastern time in the United States, and should be it's Nielsen time. That's what 4:00 is.
Well, you know what time it is? It's book report time.
Okay,
Brandon, are you ready for this? A couple of weeks ago, Brandon and I reported that Vince McMahon has enlisted the services of Sitrick and Company, which after reading this book, I have learned that for stylistic purposes, the A in "and" is capitalized in Sitrick and Company, and he makes a point of that in the book.
Oh, does he?
Yes.
Okay. I think we used a lowercase a in our article. Unfortunately,
we have gone against.
That's going to need to be revised.
Are you an uppercase D when writing out SmackDown? Because I have noticed.
No. I'm a lowercase M on WrestleMania. Too.
I know on WrestleMania I've noticed that with you, and I have fought this one over time. I feel like I'm capitulating by sometimes going to the higher case M, or in some they really love that uppercase middle letter of combining words.
No, I don't do that because why? That's a business move. They're being stylistic with the English language there in a way that the English language, I don't know, doesn't require, is my sense. And you're kind of being on their team by doing that. Same thing with the O in Takeover, NXT Takeover.
Oh, that's right. They do that in Takeover as well. Yeah, yes. that really is a thing for them.
Yes.
Well, this is Mike Sitrick, who is the head of Sitrick and Company. This was his second book. He did a book in the early 2000s, I believe, called Spin.
The Fixer is what you read, right?
This is The Fixer, yes, that I read. So this came out in 2018, so a more up-to-date account of what he does and kind of the process of the book. There's a foreword. It's written by a close confidant of his, Dennis Neal, and it pretty much goes over like, what does Michael Sitrick do? What are the services he provides? And then he goes through these like different case studies of different companies he's worked with, some of which he's had to anonymize the people or the companies for, I guess, confidentiality reasons. But so Mike Sitrick, he has been involved in some of the things he noted in the book that he's been involved is launching companies, corporate governance, hostile takeovers, which Brandon is a big fan of, regulatory fights, government investigations, but he is best known for crisis advice. And when we were doing this story, we got a lengthy list of some of the people and companies that he has represented, from the LA Dodgers, Roy Disney, who he represented when Roy Disney was having this very public proxy fight with Michael Eisner, which is documented in the book Disney War by James Stewart, which is quite an interesting book. He's represented Don King, Kobe Bryant, Aaron Brockovich, McDonald's, Steve Austin, and Hulk Hogan as well. When this news came out, two of the clients that a lot of people brought up was Harvey Weinstein, who he terminated a relationship with after several months, although did not state the reasoning. This book came out just after the Harvey Weinstein, the whole Me Too scandal began several months earlier, but he does not delve into anything with Harvey Weinstein in this book, and also represented R. Kelly for a short amount of time before R. Kelly left for another firm. And in the foreward,
he represented Jeffrey Epstein for a time too. I believe that's also a relationship.
That's right. Jeffrey Epstein's name came up as well.
The worst of his times. Yeah.
So in the foreword, as it's written by Dennis Neal here, he understands the power of storytelling and harnesses it for the purposes of persuasion. The media, both old and new, want to tell a story, and he sees his job as helping them get a better one for their audience and for his client. I have seen from the other side of the desk that he knows how to undercut and counterpunch his client's adversaries, how to turn the media to his client's favor, and how to preempt or mitigate a bad story. And so Michael Sitrick, he did have a short career in journalism. He went to school for journalism as well. And one of the things that he has conveyed is that he hires a lot of former journalists with the belief that it is easier to teach PR to a journalist than to teach journalism to a PR expert, and utilizes, he holds media in very high regard, and he sees them, I think he does look at it as a very legitimate institution, but I think he also sees it as a means to communicate when you're working with various members of the media that also have credibility and reach that comes with it. And he lists off his 10 rules. Okay, are you ready for the 10 rules, Brandon? Number 1, first, get the facts. Number 2, identify your objective. Number 3, act preemptively. He makes a big point of when you're involved in a crisis, he's often contacted way too late in the story rather than too early, which is kind of interesting for this Vince McMahon case, because you could argue that he is way deep into this case. We're talking almost 2 years by the time he is getting involved here with Mike Sitrick. Number 4, use a lead steer. And this is in regards to how you get your message out through the media, where he says it's not just about audience size, it is about respect that the journalist and the media outlet command among other journalists. Getting a favorable story from someone who is known for softball interviews won't influence other journalists to write about your client in a favorable way. So it's the idea, number one, he's not a big fan of press conferences. He likes one-on-one interviews with his clients or himself to get the message out and have a one-on-one relationship. Number two, getting ink isn't enough. Those people who say any publicity is good publicity, are in my view just making excuses for the bad press they generated or received.
Controversy creates cash.
Not in Michael Sitrick's world.
Okay.
Controversy creates problems. Number 5, focus on the fix. Rule number 6, social media is often a means to an end. Rule 7, if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you. Number 8, my personal favorite, put your opponent on the wheel of pain.
Yes, I tried to figure out what is the wheel of pain in his view.
It was on the spin the wheel, make the deal match. This was that was the
this is the Bill Watts idea. Yeah.
Yes. Rule number 9. I know Brandon loves this one. No comment can be PR malpractice. He is not a no comment guy. And rule number 10.
He told us this when we spoke with him too. Yes.
Yes. Rule number 10. Never lie. Never lie, Brandon. And he adds here, this specific, like he goes through all these different like case studies working with different companies. He has a story about there was like an outlet that was working on a story and they gathered the facts, and sort of it's like some news outlets that have either misrepresented some of his clients, and they've had to kind of go back. I mean, he says he is not shy about going over a reporter and going straight to their editor if there's a mistake, but he does give the reporter the heads up first that he is going above him to his editor. But in specific to celebrities, when celebrities stumble into controversy, 2 things help me rehabilitate their reputations. First, Americans love celebrities. They are our royalty, as many people have said. And second, Americans love a great comeback. They will forgive you if the infraction is not too grave and you do the right thing in the aftermath. Although I am not a big believer in mournful Jimmy Swaggart style apologies. Those are just words. What are you doing to fix it? And then there's the issue of nuance. As I told one very high profile individual, America will forgive an illness, but not a sickness. And he states that his job isn't to render a verdict about human behavior, it's to mitigate the damage. And his final note here, serve the client, do whatever it takes, as long as it is legal and ethical.
When was this book written? 2018 or so?
This was 2018 that this book came out. So I think that certainly, when we wrote our story and it featured like, a lot of people, these monikers that have been assigned to him, like the master of the dark arts of promotion and such, like all of these things.
The Winston Wolfe of public relations.
Yes.
Like Wizard of Spin, the flack for when you're under attack. That's from Forbes. The Spin Doctor's Spin Doctor. The Ninja Master of Dark Art Spin. And it goes on, yes. This is right on his own website.
That's what I was going to say. Like, this is all, like, he is, in many ways, like, he is marketing himself, and I think leans into this, like, you read this book, I guess, if there's one thing, it's we go case by case by case, and it's all about, like, these wins, you know what I mean? These big public victories that he has. I would like sort of like the counterbalance of times when maybe this didn't work, or your client was misleading you, or I mean, some examples of where you did not just get to come in and wave the magic wand and everything is corrected. Certainly you are kind of selling your services here and the impact that you can have in a positive way. I would have liked to have seen kind of just, examples of things that did not go well. And I mean, it does seem like he does not seem to have, like he certainly has this belief that, again, he states, it's not my job to render a verdict about human behavior. And I think like that's always an interesting question from the side of things. Like, are you applying any of your own moral compass to people that you are protecting, or is it simply that everyone has a right to their story being out regardless of what they are accused of?
He did tell us concerning Vince McMahon that he did do his own due diligence on Vince's situation. So take that for what it may be worth, that he looked into it and he's comfortable representing Vince.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought it was just worth reading this book to get a sense of someone who is.
Did you learn anything about how he might work with Vince, or what to expect here based on what you learned in this book?
If anything, I certainly get the sense that he has probably studied every word that is out there about Vince McMahon in relation to this. I think he has a very large team that he works with. And we know that Mike Sitrick is working directly with Vince McMahon, that I would imagine they are going to comb through everything and have a battle plan of defending Vince's side and utilizing whatever kind of media outlet, how they utilize like the media to get Vince McMahon's story out. And I guess we've seen it to a degree of like Vince McMahon, who had been quiet from January up until recently. And then we saw the New York Post story with the love letter that was released. We have seen obviously the statement that Vince McMahon put out defending himself. I would expect more of that. And I think that they will.
Vince's kittens and his puppy.
There was, yeah, of course, this story.
We don't know if he was already working with Mike Sitrick at this time. We should have asked, but we don't know.
So I would expect like more of that, and I would imagine that they are going to have a very. I'm sure that he's doing ample research and putting together kind of a like factual breakdown, and I don't know how that will necessarily roll with a Vince McMahon and what Vince McMahon's. We know what the relationship is here, that this was a recommendation through Mark Kasowitz, who is one of the lawyers for Vince McMahon, who is mentioned in the book.
It's his firm who is representing Vince in the Grant case.
Yeah. So there you go. That is, if you have any light reading you want to do over the next while, The Fixer, available on Amazon.
And most importantly, is Post Wrestling a lead steer?
I do not think we are a lead steer. I don't think we have.
Who's a
that,
lead steer then?
I don't know.
On the situation.
I guess it depends. The lead steer, new terminology that I was not familiar with prior to this as well. But I found it to be like an interesting book, and I would state that I think for people that have just heard of Mike Sitrick in the last like week or two, and you read like some of this, like it does give you a lot of like insight into how he goes about things. But you're also understanding like this is a book for the public, for somebody that is also selling himself and his company as well, that you're reading this. So an interesting individual. That will bring an end to the show. And coming up later on this week, we have got Wrestlenomics this Sunday, back for members at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, as Brandon will be going through all the latest wrestling news. There is no WWE press conference to dissect. There is no AEW pay-per-view this week. So we will see what is on tap this weekend, Brandon.
We'll see. What I do is I go through my Twitter, not the mentions, but I go through my own tweets, and that's usually how I construct the slides for the program. So it's usually what's ever happened between today and Sunday.
And up today, Way and I have a new edition of Rewind Away going through WrestleMania 30 from 2014, which was an event that we did cover back when they were not doing post-show press conferences.
Did you go to New Orleans?
I did go to New Orleans for that one. As I recall, I believe there was a pre-show press conference, if you want to go, if I am remembering the right year, that they did make available some of the talent before the show, which was interesting, but nothing afterward. But that is our rundown up at postwrestlingcafe.com or patreon.com/postwrestling. Nearly 3 hours going through the show, and we go through the show as well as all the news surrounding that week. This was the first WrestleMania on the WWE Network. This is the exodus of CM Punk, whose contract had not ended yet. He was still under contract until his wedding day, several months later. And of course, the big win by Daniel Bryan on this show. Hulk Hogan is the host. All of that can be found there on the latest Rewind Away. So we want to thank Lucas Charpiot for joining us, and all of you for tuning in live to the special Thursday edition. We will be back Wednesday next week in our normal day and time at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So that is it for us. Let us take one scan of any of the chat room here.
There was one.
Okay,
there was one.
Let's
you
get
scroll.
one
here we go. Oh, there we go.
The USA extension for Raw tells me that NBCU could have NBA fill the void in 2025 if they win the bid for the rights. This is a great point to bring up with the the ongoing NBA rights that are in play, that reportedly Comcast is set to offer $2.6 billion a year for the NBA rights. Now, Warner Brothers Discovery, they have the matching rights, but to go, I think they're paying 1.2. So to jump to 2.6 would be an enormous undertaking for Warner Brothers Discovery that is already in, I think their stock is down 40% year over year. They have had a rough go of things. And certainly there's the side effect of where AEW falls into all of this. But we were talking as well, Brandon, this week about the carriage fees and the idea that losing the NBA could drastically affect that for TNT, but you offset that with how much are you saving if you no longer have the NBA. But TNT could be a completely different network without the NBA that they've had for decades.
Yeah, the TNT is about $3 per subscriber. They're paying just over $1 billion a year for the NBA rights.
I think it's around 1.2, but yeah, in that ballpark.
So if you take that off of their cost, we've got an extra $1 billion to spend. But then again, they're going to have to go back to all of their carriers, all the cable and satellite systems, and renegotiate their fees if they lose live NBA games. So it's really just a question of what do the carriage fees end up being for a TNT without the NBA games there, and does that actually leave TNT with more or less money after that renegotiation happens? Does it mean something for AEW? It could mean fewer homes. I'm skeptical that it's going to really end up being fewer homes. And I mean, for one thing, look at how many homes something like FS1 is in that has baseball and some college football, I think. Now, granted, they could also take that free $1.2 billion and bid on something like the UFC or other rights as they come up. They do still have March Madness games on TNT, which they've been simulcasting a lot of the later rounds, I think. But they have something, and I don't know if it means a ton for AEW, but it could affect how much money WBD is willing to offer them. And it would, if you watch some NBA games, watch an NBA game this week, watch the playoff games, and you will see AEW ads. And if you're AEW, it's really good to be having, AEW promos on in the middle of, one of the most watched sports telecasts of the week.
There you have it, everybody. The NBA rights, it's got everyone's attention. Mark Shapiro, he is excited about this sports bubble that continues to grow and grow. I guess the question would be for Mark Shapiro, will AEW get a multiple X increase on their next run?
For his narrative, they better.
Yeah, he's got to be optimistic about the future of AEW's rights.
We didn't get to talk about this. Ari Emanuel did not participate. He did the opening statements, which I suspect were recorded like the day before or something. He's the CEO of this company. The message I get is that Mark Shapiro is running TKO, and maybe Ari Emanuel is just running Endeavor. And if that's the case, I don't know. Somebody needs to explain to me why then he's the CEO and not just the chairman or something. He is the chairman of the board of directors for TKO. Why is he so not involved with this earnings call?
Yeah, it's an interesting question about how hands-on Ari Emanuel is when it comes to you also, he's probably spearheading this whole Endeavor going private, and how much his days are divided from TKO business, that more is deferred to Mark Shapiro and Nick Khan.
And this is combined with when TKO does these appearances at TMT conferences. We got one coming up for the JP Morgan. Who's going to be speaking? It's Mark Shapiro. It's not Ari Emanuel, which is fine. If he's got enough on his plate, but why is he the CEO then?
Well, it's a good question. The man had I can't remember what the figure was.
He's getting paid too, by the way. He's still getting paid.
I was gonna say his income last year. He was he's doing all right. He can certainly he
got a $20 million bonus for the closing of the deal, but he's also drawing. I was looking at the proxy. I don't remember. He's drawing over $1 million in base salary, not to mention stock bonuses and all these things that high level executives get.
All right, that's going to wrap up the show. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and we're back next Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and that concludes Pollock and Thurston. Goodbye.